Hello, everyone. My name is Darin, and I will be discussing my theory-based after-school HIV prevention program for LGBTQ plus youth. So we'll just be listening a little background, specifically HIV and related risk factors among LGBTQ plus youth and that community as a whole. And then just the details about the program, such as like activities, recruitment, and evaluation. And I'll be going a little more in depth about the logic model, about the inputs, the outputs, assumptions, and the outcomes, short term, medium term, and long term. And then finally, be going into a little evaluation of the program, how to evaluate its effectiveness and its impact on reducing HIV among LGBTQ plus youth. So to start with this background in the problem area, about 80% of HIV infections among those aged 18 to 24 occurred among men who have sex with men. Which, just to preface here, not all MSM are considered part of the LGBTQ plus community, but a majority of them do identify as gay and bisexual, which is why I included this fact here. And it shows that a majority of HIV infections occur among LGBTQ plus youth. Um, Also, another little note is that youth is identified as different definitions throughout a different age range and different studies. So during my literature review and for this study, it's consists of people ages from 13 to 24. Um, so higher rates of HIV occur among people of color. Rates have increased by 87% since 2000 and are continuing to rise. And then African Americans comprise more than half of all infections of HIV among youth. High rates among young transgender women. Um, Rates are 50 times higher than the general population. So there's a significant need for an intervention here that targets LGBTQ plus youth, because the majority of infections among young people are LGBTQ. So general risk factors of why this is occurring and why we're seeing these higher rates of HIV and LGBTQ plus youth compared to their cisgender heterosexual counterparts would be lack of sexual education in schools, risky sexual behaviors, some social factors related to being LGBTQ plus, and then low testing rates. So yeah, lack of sexual education. So in general, LGBTQ plus aren't really considered in the curriculum for sex ed in high schools, and this is seen in those different in outcomes. So sexual minority males in high school were less likely to report learning about HIV and AIDS in school, and less than half of schools in the United States report providing HIV education pertaining to LGBTQ plus youth. And then for adolescent sexual minority males reported learning about HIV in school were less likely to engage in risky sexual behaviors, and they reported less lifetime sexual partners. So some risky sexual behaviors that this population engages in, they're less likely to use condoms, which again stems from that lack of sex ed. They have their first sexual encounters at an early age, um, and then just an increased number of sexual partners. And these all again relates to increasing risk for HIV, because again, the more times you engage in sexual behaviors, kind of increases that chance of transmitting HIV as well. So some social factors. So in the LGBTQ community as a whole, there's a greater risk for depression and other mental disorders, which increase risk for partaking in risky sexual behaviors. Uh, Low educational attainment, this applies kind of more on the adult side, but they're less likely to finish high school, which again, they're less likely to complete high school and participate in sexual education and not receive the knowledge they need to make those healthy decisions regarding their sexual choices. There's also decreased social support among some LGBTQ plus youth. And so increased support is a protective factor in most health outcomes, but specifically for uh, sexual behaviors. It's common for LGBT plus youth to be isolated from their family and friends due to their sexual identity and gender identity. Um, and they're also more likely to be a victim of sexual abuse, which increases risk for unhealthy sexual behaviors. So some low testing rates, so they're just less likely to get tested for HIV than their heterosexual cisgender counterparts. So 7% of LGBTQ students test for HIV, and 40% of them are unaware of their positive status. And about 33% of all new HIV infections, they are unaware of their status. They do not know they're positive for HIV, which then that contributes to negative outcomes related to their status. Adverse effects from having HIV. The earlier you get tested, the earlier you find out you're positive, the earlier you can get treatment and control it, and then prevent its progression to AIDS and other adverse outcomes as well. So with that, and with the risk factors and the background established, we can start going into kind of details about the program. So the mission is to reduce risky sexual behaviors and HIV among LGBTQ plus youth. And with the vision of providing LGBTQ plus youth with the skills needed to reduce the risk for HIV by including how to engage in safe sex practices and the logistics and the realities of getting tested for HIV, just providing them with the resources that they need to make those healthy decisions. So program overview. So it's going to be a 4-week after-school program in high schools. So it's 1 weekly 2-hour sessions, which include discussion with all participants, and topics include HIV prevention, which is, again, those safe sexual practices, testing, and then if they were to develop HIV, how would that life look like for them? How is living with HIV? What is the reality of living with HIV? So the program also serves as a pilot for possible curricula for LGBTQ plus focused HIV education in schools. So again, one goal of this program is to cement this into schools across the country to ensure that LGBTQ plus people are included in sex ed, and it doesn't have to be an after-school program. It's just in the curricula for all students. So recruitment will occur via announcements in health classes and through gay straight alliances. The program will be completely voluntary for students, but it will have to require parental permission just because it is a vulnerable population and they are underage, and that's just kind of a nature of after-school programs with these topics. Program will be distributed and led by trained staff and volunteers as well. And so I chose schools for this as a setting for this intervention because one study found that HIV education, just STD kind of interventions were more effective in school settings that targeted LGBTQ plus youth and youth in general as well. So a little timeline on how kind of this program would occur. Week 1 is like an inventory, so just an assessment of the knowledge of HIV and sexual behaviors, and kind of introducing everyone to the group and making everyone comfortable and creating kind of a shared space before we go into these kind of sensitive topics, especially on this population as well. And week 2 is focusing on prevention, safe sexual practices. And then week 3 is testing, which is just emphasizing getting tested for HIV, the timeline of when to get tested, where to get tested, how that looks like. And then week 4 is kind of living with HIV, discussion with people who have the disease and how their life was impacted by it. And also the HIV providers, and kind of one of the best ways to maintain a positive HIV status, including what undetectable means, and that other terminology as well. So program outlines specific activities within each week of the program. So week 1, that inventory. So each participant will fill out a checklist on their understanding of HIV and their sexual behaviors. And then that weekly discussion is just regarding their perceptions and their personal perceived susceptibility to getting HIV as LGBTQ plus. Week 2 is prevention. So each participant will see resources, including condoms, that help promote safer sex. And then that weekly discussion will focus on safe sexual practice, including limited sexual partners, and also safety online. We see this more in LGBTQ plus youth and LGBTQ population as a whole. There's just increased meeting sexual partners online, and just sexual activity online as well. And so just emphasizing that safety related to preventing HIV and other STDs, but also other stuff as well as reducing kind of risk for violence and stuff like that. Um, week 3 is testing, so discussion on experiences with HIV and STD testing, whether personal, and just explaining and teaching them and providing that knowledge on what that looks like. And also a field trip to testing sites so they really understand where these sites are located and what it would look like when they were get tested for HIV. So I think there's a lot of nervousness and taboo and fear on getting tested. So if they already have to expose before they get tested, it might make them more willing to get tested once they engage in sexual activity. And then again, that final week is living with HIV. So a panel with those living with HIV and HIV providers to dwell on the realities of what it looks like. And then final discussion regarding their perceptions of HIV and sexual behaviors, what they learned. And then they'll also fill out that same checklist from week 1, and they'll be able to kind of compare and show their progress throughout the program as well. So where does theory lie into this? So 2 main theories kind of influence the development of this program. So one being social network theory. So connections have a significant influence on one's behavioral choices, especially among youth, and that's shown through the social network theory. And specifically with LGBTQ plus people, there's a strong sense of community. Most friends of LGBTQ plus person are also LGBTQ plus, and that just increases the level of influence. So if one person is to engage with certain behavior, their community and network will likely follow as well. So within this program, discussions with peers and learning about HIV education as a group would increase chances of adopting healthy sexual behaviors. That's why one form of recruitment for this program is through gay straight alliances, because there's already a built connection there. And so going through that program with people just increases that level of influence as you'll learn like the knowledge and how to engage in these healthy sexual behaviors. The health belief model as well. I mentioned perceived susceptibility earlier, which is a construct of this model, and that impacts choice and healthy behaviors. If you know you're more susceptible to getting disease, you're more likely to take action to prevent uh, infection. So if LGBTQs understand their increased risk for HIV, specifically gay and bisexual men, they will likely engage in the explained and provided healthy sexual behaviors. And this will be discussed earlier, but this will be evaluated by the checklist during that first and final week. So a little more into the logic model of how kind of the program will work. So some inputs, time, it's 4 2-hour sessions at over 8 hours, but it also includes recruitment, planning, evaluation, as well as volunteers to help conduct the study, the panelists during that final week about living with HIV, the money needed to provide students with materials, paying staff if needed, and materials such as like condoms, pens, papers, other incentives to encourage participation. School participation as well. So again, this is a sensitive topic, HIV already, but also on top that's focused on LGBTQ plus youth. So it's important the school kind of supports and allows this program. And then parental permission. So without parental permission, students are unlikely to participate in the program. And so outputs. So we've mentioned some of these activities before, but discussions regarding perception of HIV and sexual behaviors, workshops on safe sex practices and HIV testing, and advocating for curriculum changes to include LGBTQ plus and sex education. So the main program itself is more on that kind of individual, interpersonal level, which is behavior change and providing the knowledge needed to engage in sexual behaviors and reduce risk for HIV. But we also want to focus on the policy level as well, which is putting this knowledge at the baseline in the future so that everyone already has access to this information and does not have to be an after-school program. And then again, the audience would just be participation would be the participants, the students, the parents as well, because students will likely talk to their families about this. Uh, if parents have permission, they'll likely want to ask what they learned in this program. And the state education board as well, they are in charge of the curriculum. And so we want to reach out to them and kind of show them how this program works and how this could influence curricula in the future. So some outcomes, starting with short term, students will gain increased knowledge regarding HIV and sexual behaviors. Um, it will increase their perceived susceptibility. They'll understand that they're just being LGBTQ plus, they are at increased risk for HIV and other STDs, which will likely influence them to engage in safer sexual behaviors. And then again, improving awareness and reality living with HIV. I think many of us don't understand what that may look like, and so understanding how contemporarily living with HIV looks like today, that may provide a little more awareness and influence decision making as well regarding sexual behaviors. So medium term outcomes will increase condom use and testing utilization because now they have that knowledge and they can apply that to their daily lives. And then again, cementing LGBTQ plus sex education into school curricula, whether it's at school specifically or statewide. And then initiating PrEP use when sexually active as well. Some long-term outcomes in the LGBTQ plus youth as a whole, just increase engagement in safe sexual practices, and decrease in HIV incidence among LGBTQ plus youth, decreasing the rate of infection, and then increasing exposure to HIV and sex education in school among LGBTQ plus people. Because as we mentioned earlier in that background, those who were exposed had reduced lifetime sexual partners, and they had an increase in protective sexual behaviors. So increasing that exposure would reduce those risky behaviors, which would also reduce the incidence and risk of HIV. So some assumptions. It is assumed that schools will allow for this program to occur, and it is assumed that parents will allow their children to participate in this program, and it is assumed that students will engage with the material and with each other to increase their levels of influence. Because as we mentioned, the social network theory requires levels of influence from their peers. And so if students are engaging with the material and with each other, that level of influence will occur, which may reduce kind of the program's effectiveness as well. And some of external factors, levels of community acceptance of LGBTQ plus youth and LGBTQ plus in general. So say this program, we applied it to Nevada and Florida, it may be two completely different programs just because of the levels of acceptance. It may not even be applicable in Florida just based on the laws and the legislation they have against that LGBTQ plus community. So I think that's something to consider where you apply this program and where it will be effective as well. And then socioeconomic centers for school as well. So again, this is an after-school program because it's just kind of like a pilot to test an LGBTQ plus curricula. So some students may have to participate in after-school jobs if they are in a low socioeconomic community, which again will prevent participation in the program. And then transportation as well. It's after school. If it's a low-income community, they may not offer kind of late buses and late transportation. And so students may not be able to participate if they don't have a ride home. Because say if their parents are working late or whatever it may be, they may not have the means to stay after school. And that's something kind of you can't control and can't account for. Finally, evaluation. So the program again will collect information regarding HIV knowledge and perceived susceptibility, as well as surveys kind of related to that checklist with demographic information, their participation in sexual behaviors, and their sexual health history. And so they'll be collected several times during the beginning of the program, as well as that last week, as well as every year after the program is completed to monitor the impact and see if that knowledge stayed with them, as well as impact of their behaviors as well. And then again, feedback will be collected from participants, parents, and schools to see if there's any way they can improve the program. and what can be done to make it more effective and long-lasting. So those are my references. And thank you. Please let me know if you have any questions in the discussion below. Thank you.